Hello, my name is Rohit, and we are from Group 4, consisting of Erwin, James, and Matthew. And we are here now to present our social inclusion project assignment. Matthew, take the lead.
Okay. Um, for our topic for the social inclusion project is the starting growth in poverty among young people, especially in the Gen Z. And our goal of the project is to demonstrate how today's Generation Z is financially disadvantaged. Next slide, please. Okay. We have two types of data for the project. The first one is infographic, and the second one is interview. We had already conducted a survey for over 20 participants and open-ended question for two participants. On the next slides, we will be sharing our results about the survey of Generation Z. Next. And the sample of our survey is mostly from 2003, and our close friends are born between 2000 till 2005, but the most participants are from 2003. Next. Opinion. Gen Z is poorer than previous generation. And as we can see here, 64.7% of our participants said it is false. But we can see from the other slides after this. Next, please. The bulk of Gen Z still live with their parents or guardians. This also implies that our poll is biased towards individuals whose living expenses are met by the guardians. Next. And for the next slide, we will discuss about the financial issues of the Gen Zs. Next, please. Most of the source of income that Gen Z get is from their parents' allowance, and only 14.6% of our Gen Z members are employed for one reason or another. Next, please. And the total income, a tiny fraction of the Gen Z cumulative income earns above average living expenses, with the remainder failing somewhere in the center or below. This data reflects the former source of income, which is baffling. More, more than half of the source of income, the amount of the income is still less than 2.5 million. Next slide will be presented by the another participant of our group. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Matthew. The next slide is about Gen Z avoiding tertiary. Despite having more combined average and above average income from previous slide, the majority of Gen Z cannot afford tertiary needs. This is also suggests an emphasis on relative poverty rather than absolute poverty, with the percentage of Gen Z making enough for unnecessary wants being only 38.5% from our survey. Next slide, please. How about affording primary? For our survey, even for the standard, a small percentage of Gen Z cannot or struggle to afford basic necessities. This demonstrates once more how most members of Generation Z do not experience extreme poverty, yet a small percentage does. Next slide, please. And then this is to compare to the global standard. We have the source from charted the Gen Z unemployment rate compared to the older generation. This is significant since in comparison to other generation, especially millennials, the rate of employment in a comparable age group is significantly greater. As you can see, the red dot signify the Gen Z, and then the blue dot signify the millennials. The gap is so dispersed that many countries shows that the millennials unemployment rate is lower than the Gen Z unemployment rate. Next slide, please. Now we are getting to the struggles of Gen Z. Next slide, please. So for the Gen Z, what are the job options? Gen Z life philosophy is favored to choose a vocation that will pay well even if they loathe it, highlighting the fact that Gen Z is more concerned with financial stability than with their own happiness. Next slide, please. And then, how are they comfortable with their financial situation? Most Gen Z are actually anxious about their financial situation, which make them uneasy, leaving little time for other options and concentrating solely on financial. Next slide, please. And then how about the struggles of being bullies or social exclusion? Some Gen Z felt socially inept because of their financial situation. Bullying and social exclusion followed as a result. Uh, as can as can be seen from our survey, there are a small percentage of our Gen Z that are being bullied because of economic and being socially excluded in financial situation. Next slide, please. And then how about Gen Z mental health or physical health? Because of their financial position, some portion of Gen Z were both either physiologically or physically impacted. In this sense, these data could fluctuate depending on the variable individual. However, data shows that for mental health, it's more frequent for our participants to agree that mental health is being affected. Next slide, please. And then the desire of Gen Z wanting to earn more. Uh, Gen Z are more likely to seek a skill to increase their income in light of the fact that their present situation and skill set continue to provide certain challenges, as can be seen from our survey with above than 50% of our participants agree with them wanting to possess a money-making skill. Next slide, please. How about Gen Z wanting to find a help for finding job? Even with their own effort, Gen Z require additional assistance in getting work. This indicates that they are still likely to face certain obstacles that either lead them to financially disadvantage, and then it can be seen from our survey that about more than 50% of Gen Z need help with the work. Next slide, please. Next slide will be continued by Erwin.
Okay. Thank you, James, for the presentation. I will continue the open-ended answer from the Gen Z. Okay. The Gen Z reason for the rise of poverty. So from the data we gather, Gen Z assumed that there were many causes for this problem. However, based on their own experience, the surge in accommodation price is a clear sign of one. And additionally, reasons are being brought about primarily experienced by Gen Z. So as you can see from the pie diagram in the left, Gen Z think the rise of property has many reasons, from the increase of cost education, increase of accommodation costs such as rent, lack of quality education, increased cost of food items, less job opportunities, and others. And also there's a comment. So these two Gen Z have drawn attention to the inability to function in a genuine work environment, with one blaming an outmoded educational system and the other about having weaker skill, networking, and other internal problems. So as you can see in the left, there's a comment about inability to function in a genuine work environment, and so on. And also, furthermore, the majority of Gen Z are concerned with inflation. Furthermore, teenagers have a propensity to acquire unnecessary items in order to keep up with the trends, especially during this severe COVID outbreak, which caused massive change in everyday life. Agency for prevention and further planning. As you can see in the left, so both response address the significance of learning skill, with one emphasizing the internet as a learning medium and the other emphasizing the individual own desire and capabilities. Furthermore, the most often discussed topics among Gen Z are communication, entrepreneurship, and gaining new skill. Summary, what we have established that analyzing the statistic help us to quantitatively reinforce the premise that Gen Z economic situation is not absolute, with some notable exception. According to the data, the majority of Gen Z do not believe themselves to be financially stable, overwhelming the financially capable, resulting to the struggle. As a response, a portion of Gen Z were socialized or ostracized, which may be linked to the rise of social media and the race to fame via social media. And also, the consequences of relative poverty on mental health may fluctuate, with the majority of them being negative. Finally, we were able to gather qualitative explanation and remedies for poverty in order to maximize brainstorming and promote awareness, as most of us are unaware of Gen Z situation as shown in the open-end question. This is our interview process with Brian and with Brian. This is our interview result. Brian view. The interview is about the survey question and gathering further information. Brian's viewpoint provide insight into the life of Gen Z experiencing the current dilemma that is anticipated and pushed upon Gen Z, with the intention of realizing that this disadvantage issue is detrimental of Gen Z. One may gain a more complete viewpoint after viewing the entire interview. And Sayunda view is this interview with Sayunda is follow up to a previous query on Gen Z reaction to seeing data from the news source, the option to agree or disagree with the fact, as well as how this connect to Sayunda experience as Gen Z. Conclusively, she would explain why she agreed with some and disagree with another if she didn't reflect the Gen Z experience. Okay. Will be continue with my friend, the big concept.
All right, so for the big concepts, we will be inferring the questions asked. So next slide, please. Which uh, talking about the first question, it will be about how or what causes this societal problem, aka poverty, and what fuels them. So next slide, please. Uh, stat- Statistics from Business Insider shows that 65% of Gen Z are living from one paycheck to another, which just means that after they have had their salary done for the month, they aren't able to save a big amount of that money because they will only all use it for their necessary spendings. So this means that a whopping 58% of them aren't able to save enough for emergency expenses. So using the question, you may ask what fuels such a global issue, especially in the younger generation. Well, we can use, again, data from Business Insider and our survey and our interview so we can like compare them and we can infer that there is an agreement that one of the leading causes of poverty is the rise in accommodations. This is so because as Business Insider points out, people are always in the market for better paying jobs. But more often than not, these better paying jobs are located in big cities in which people flock to. So this decreases the supply of accommodations in those big cities and increases rent, therefore skyrocketing poverty in Gen Z. Furthermore, other agreements have been found in both our surveys and interviews with Business Insider that there are other reasons, such as the rise of food costs, lack of job opportunities, and even lifestyle inflation, which just basically means that keeping up with the trends and not properly uh, spending your money, as some of our respondents have pointed out. So, next slide, please. So, how are different generations viewing the issue/problems from various perspectives? Next slide, please. So we can use the perspective of the prior generations while uh, while perceiving Gen Z because Gen Z has a far greater chance of redeeming their prior blunder by advancing to a far higher level using all means possible. This is usually conveyed negatively to Generation Z as it is a manner of anticipating and planning for the future. As a result, more discontent is transmitted across both generations, widening the age gap and subjecting Gen Z to realistic poverty. And another issue I want to touch upon is the prior generations had more access to land and job opportunities, which meant that compared to Gen Z, the income gap is much higher than is much lower than it is now. So Gen Z is experiencing both a very large income back gap, which also fuels the cause of relative poverty. Next slide, please. So, is there any reason or any action, sorry, being taken to address the societal issue? And what would you do in this situation? Next slide, please. Uh, as for poverty, there are actually various ways to deal with this problem. However, using our surveys and interviews, the most practical method we found would be to gain more skills and focus on improving our real world people skills such as entrepreneurship and networking so that we are able to land in better positioning jobs with better pay without having to migrate to another city. There should be a typo there, sorry about that. This means that we wouldn't increase accommodation cost, and so inflation on rent or mortgages will not be as high, thus decreasing the need to pay a huge amount of Gen Z salary on just living costs. Furthermore, learning these critical skills, especially especially entrepreneurship, may open up new markets and job positions. Because if a businessman is extremely talented, then he can open up a whole industry or a whole market, thus creating lots of job positions. So that means Gen Z will be able to participate in the labor force more as compared to the other countries. So next slide, please. So in conclusion, as it is right now, Gen Z is facing poverty which ultimately impacts their lives as a whole. Even if the experience is not very visible to them, it is presentable with further evidence from the response and in the survey, including the open-ended question with the interview. This, which also includes other sources. As a result, the conclusion is drawn that despite certain data errors and minor errors, we can confidently declare that the statement, the startling growth in poverty among young people, especially in Gen Z, is factual from our perspective. Next slide will be our reference slide. And next slide, please. This will be the slide where our interviews will be placed. So if you would like to gain further perspective or further knowledge upon this topic, you may feel free to just watch the interviews. And next slide. And thank you. That is all from our group. And thank you very much for listening to this presentation. And we hope that we have done our deed and increased attention to poverty in the young generation, especially Gen Z.